Hey everybody, it's Marty the JavaScript Party and my buddy Rhett. I already gave her nut for today. She was, but she's having a pretty good time. She doesn't usually get to sit out here at this time. It's 10:02 a.m. It's 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everybody who's in the U.S. If you're a fan of the U.S., then of the United States, then it's a very happy day for us. This is a day we declared independence. We are in a weird spot. I guess we're always in a weird spot in this country, but it feels weirder than normal. But I bet you I would say that every year for the last 20 years. Um, but yeah, so we quite divided in the country at the moment. I don't think that there have been many times in my 56 rotations around the sun living in this country. I don't think there's ever. I would probably, unless probably less than 5 years of my life have we ever sort of not been very very divided in this country. I think it's pretty normal. It's 80 degrees right now at 10 a.m. 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So it looks like it's gonna be a hot day, hot day. As soon as I get done with this, we're gonna go out and try to have some fun, do a little bit of shopping. It's sort of an American tradition, and then maybe try to find a t-shirt, couple t-shirts to wear this evening, and then you know, eat at a restaurant, maybe two. Just have a good time in general. I think me and my wife plan to have a fairly quiet night. We're gonna, I think, just roast some hot dogs on our deck, and we have a lot. We're blessed to be surrounded by tons of trees, but it does make it hard to see fireworks. But we do have a little bit of a patch of clear space above there, so maybe there'll be some fireworks, and maybe I'll go out and buy a couple of fireworks. Um, all that. It used to be pretty fun. Like we used to have like this sort of tradition where we would drive to the next state over, buy fireworks, and come back and shoot them off. But now they're legal here. And then the first year they were legal was pretty fun because you would go in and you'd buy some fireworks and it was really cool. But the fireworks businesses, I guess they've probably gotten themselves all in deep credit issues, and now they're um, now when you go in there, you can just it's just a desperate situation. They're like you could tell they're trying to pay bills and stuff, and it's no fun buying fireworks anymore, um, which is kind of a bummer. But the world is constantly changing. I was kind of hoping to finish up unit testing today. I don't know if I will. I definitely don't. I definitely want to have a nice, relaxing day, so I don't want to like put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself to finish it up. But I was thinking while I was walking my dogs this morning about how like there's this saying that I've always heard my entire life, and it's like there's a time and place for everything. And about a week ago, sometime this week, it dawned on me that that's not a saying. That is not a fact. The fact is that's a goal. That's what you should try to achieve. And when you're developing software, probably there's like three things you really need to always focus on. And one is like, how does the application work? Is it still working? Is it still good application? Is it useful? Are you on mission of the overall application? Two is like, is the code itself at the lowest level, is it robust and stable? Like, that is so freaking important. Yes, you can get code working. You can write a bunch of code. You can get stuff working. You can do a lot of stuff. But like, you can do it in such a way that there's no way to ever make sense of it once it's built. And then number three is like adding features or fixing bugs. Like, and those three behaviors are very, very different. And you really do need to carve out a time and a place for all three of those. And if you ignore any of those three sort of agendas, you're gonna have either like I've worked at plenty of places where we have an application that is just stupid. It's just stupid. You're trying to use it, it's just stupid. And it's just like, why would anybody want to use this? This is stupid. Right? And it's like, well, because they were so focused on on the code itself that they never really took the time to make sure that the application still made any sense at all. And then I've worked at places where like everything makes sense, but you go under the hood and there's just no making sense of what the heck they have going on in there. And it's because like, yeah, like and where I really see it is when like things are outsourced a lot. Like somebody will be like they have a vision for the software they want, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, we're gonna spend like a week and or a month, and we're gonna hire a bunch of people from all around the world to build out what we need. And then they look at that, and then maybe they wait another year, and then they go, okay, these are the 5 changes I want to make, and then they hire people from all around the world to do those changes, and then they're like, okay, oh, this is pretty cool. Okay, this is getting cool, and then the next year they do it again, and then the next year, eventually you get to the point where like that code makes no sense at all. Um, like everyone has just come in and just patched and just tweaked things to make it all work, um, because they nobody crafted the code, nobody cared about behind the scenes. They only cared about the actual application. And you really do need a balance of like, okay, someone who cares about the application, someone who cares about the actual units, and that all the little pieces of the code all make sense and that everything fits together, and then somebody that actually patches everything together and gets it all working and all that. And so like you really want to set aside a time and a place for all three of those agendas, especially if you're just like one person working by yourself. um, and that is, I feel like unit testing is when you do the part where you craft and you focus on the small pieces and just make sure that everything's nice and clean and that it all fits together and that everything makes sense. Like that unit testing is the time for that. And then bug fixing and all that, that's just freaking like or adding features. That's like, okay, the house is on fire. Let's just put the house out. Let's get everything let's get everything working. Or we need to install a new freaking bathroom in the house. So let's just figure out how to get it, and then we'll figure out how to clean it up and make it nice later. Like you can't be like doing all the little stuff to make it really nice, all the small details to make it really nice while you're trying to do the big work. You just can't. It's just too stressful. And then you can't also be like sitting at 30,000 feet making sure that the application all works. So, anyways, at this point, our goal is, I think, to not necessarily to unit test everything to make sure it does what it's supposed to do, but more like just to make sure everything makes sense, from a like that this delete visualization for ID filter does what delete visualization for renderer ID filter does. Not to think of how this fits in the main grand scheme of things, but how this focused one little function works and that it makes any sense at all, right? So like, um, right off the bat, I think I want to name this visualization, right? And I do, and I know I've been confused before, because we do have another thing called a visualization that is actually a physical implementation of a visualization. So we want an ST visualization. And I misspelled it. And it is so weird for me. It really screws my brain up how we shift from S's to Z's. Um, like visualization. Like, I don't know. But anyways, so we did a little bit of cleanup on that. And unit testing is sort of the last, while you're coding, it's a lot easier. Like while you're fixing a bug or doing a feature, life is easier when you name things properly. But while you're unit testing is probably when you need to really put an eye on things and make sure that it all, like all your names and all that makes sense. It is a time for that. Um, so hit save, sort of make sure that nothing broke. And now we need to and basically I did go through and I tried to find like easy things to like I'd like to start when I do unit testing. I like to start from the easiest and go to the hardest. But there is just nothing easy to unit test in this specific thing, this specific file. Now we had another file that we were working on, and every other file that we worked on in this was super simple. And now we've come into this, um, what is it called? Visualization service, and it's just a shit show, right? It is so hard to figure out. There's just so many complex, advanced things going on, and this is probably some of the most advanced code you'll ever see, even though it looks tiny, because we are literally creating a function. This is returning a function that returns a true or false. And the only reason we're doing that is because we want to have um, access to this renderer ID. So basically, this is a factory function. This is a function that prints a new function, and as part of its encoding, it gets access to whatever the renderer ID is. So it's a custom function for this specific renderer ID, and that is a weird concept. Um, and it is a super advanced pattern in computer science in general, and and it's hard to wrap your mind around. I mean, just the fact that it has two returns in it makes it like to me like kind of screws me up. Like return and return, that's weird. um and I don't like that look, and maybe that is why. um like, because one of the things you can do, and I don't know, maybe I should do it. I don't like it, but maybe I should learn to like it. Is you can do this, right? Instead of, if you don't have any brackets, that's sort of like a secret coder ring way of saying, oh, okay, then just by default, if it doesn't have brackets and it just has one line, then the default is just return whatever the result of that line is. I don't know. I guess I now that I kind of see this return, and I find it emotionally repulsive. I don't know. Like, I get offended by the fact that I have two returns right next to each other. Um, I guess I see now. I can kind of see why the people came up with that. But and then with something that's really strange is like another thing that you can do is you can get rid of. So basically, we did a shortcut, and then we could do another shortcut, which a lot of people advocate for, is we could actually get rid of the parentheses around there. And that's another sort of shorthand way to make it more terse. But the downside of that, which is equally as annoying, is that now you lose any ability to um, add strong typing to it, because you need apparently you can't have the colon and the type without the parentheses. They have to happen together, which is weird. It's like, why do you need the parentheses to have a colon? But you do. And that's just the reality that we live in. Will you always? Probably not. That will probably, somebody eventually will realize that there's absolutely no reason that you should have these parentheses around there. And the Angular team, like, I don't know why they do that. Maybe they do it because they want to stay like TypeScript, like they want to be TypeScript uh, in sync, or who knows. But anyways, you could do that, and that's kind of nice. But we do need to write a unit test for this, and filters probably should. The name of the unit test should be like, or the assertion should text should be filters for delete by renderer ID. That seems like a good one. So anyways, at this point, the trick that I always do, and who knows if this is always going to work, is I always open this and close this. I'm trying to figure out where I'm at, right? Like it's weird. I think if you close everything, maybe. I know it is inside of services, and then you you close this, and then if you double click on this, let's close that, and then open that, click on that. There we go. So it showed me where I'm at in here on the left. So let's just close as much stuff as we can, because it is just mental clutter. So we're in this visualization service, and I want to create a specification for this function that basically its only job in life is to delete the visualization based, to filter the visualizations based on the renderer ID. And that's like another thing that I've noticed in a lot of places that have like really good unit testing, or heavy unit testing, is they really do use this as sort of a backdoor way of creating documentation. So like if you want to know what a function does, this is generally reading this assertion text. I believe it's called assertion text. No, expectation text. Textual description of what the spec is checking is very often the best documentation in the entire, in existence. So filters, visualizations based on render ID, and it's renderer ID. And then basically, and again, I would like to be very clear that and that is so wild, because when I call this function, so when I call this function, I'm going to get a function back. And this is really cool. This is probably, like, I was trying to explain this yesterday and I couldn't. And I think this is I think this approach that we're taking of this unit test is providing me the opportunity to actually explain this in a way that is like clears up things up in my head and will make it easier for me to speak of. And so this is a filter function. And this is going to be equal to service, and it's only called service because it got named service at the top of this thing. That is not some sort of behind the thing. And delete. And we're just going to call it 1 for now. We're going to come back and do something better, right? So we have a function is what we have, right? So, and it is even, we can even just grab this. This is a function that accepts a visualization. That returns returns a function that is a visualization. And I think this should be st visualization too. And I think that this does sort of show how, like, this is the moment. This is the moment that I see the V and I go, that sticks out like a sore thumb. That does not always stick out like a sore thumb. But at this point, well, we're like looking under a microscope at our application. That's what we're doing right now. Like, if you're looking under the microscope at some animal, like, you can't really tell what the well-being of the overall animal is, but you can look and do a deep analysis of whatever it is you're looking at. And sometimes that's what you need. But I'm going to hit save. And I believe our numbers will get better. So we got functions. We have 128 of 135. And hopefully after this, we have 129 of 135. And that's what we have. And I do feel like that is actually very good for your brain, right? Like, that is, in my body, just gave me a little bit of a dopamine hit, a little bit of a little happy drug, because, like I did something, I had something that I expected, and then it happened for me. And had it not happened for me, then I would have got a little negative. And a little negative and a little positive in your life is probably an important thing. So now what'll happen is that, okay, so what are we expecting? When I hit refresh, this should not be red anymore. And then this should um, this won't be read anymore, but this actual function itself won't have been executed. All right. So now one thing I don't like is the fact that it's V, it says V here, but, and I do want to actually add this strong typing here. So I would like to tell this that this is what it's getting back. Yep. So that's good. That worked perfectly fine. And I don't want this to be called V. I want it to be called ST visualization. I don't want the chance of thinking that I'm working with a visualization of a ThreeJS or a Angular visualization. See, my Angular components are called visualizations as well, and I don't know what I should have done differently. I can definitely see arguments to changing the name so that in my brain they can be easily sort of separated from each other, but at the same time, I also don't. It's good to keep the same naming schemes. Like you don't want to have something where in one set of code you call it a ball, and then in the next set of code you call it a sphere. Um, so like I'm at sort of one of those points where it's like, cut the baby in half. You just don't know what to do because there's sort of almost equal arguments in both directions. But I think I can still do that. I don't think it cares what the name of this variable is. And that's like another funny thing about code is sometimes stuff matters and sometimes it doesn't. But I do want to change this to ST visualization. All right, so, and then I want to refresh this, and I'm thinking that none of this will all be red here, but all the rest of it will be green. Yep. So now our function that we returned didn't ever get to be executed. So we have the function, we have an instance of a function, we created a function. I feel like that is clear as day now. Um, I feel like I could not put this into words a few minutes ago. And now I think it feels like it's clear as day that this returns a function. And it returns a function that has a boolean, that returns a boolean. And that the ID is one. So let's do that. And I think it should be a const. And then test ID. Test render ID is equal to 1. I think it's very clear that this is a renderer ID that we're testing. Now, what a renderer ID is, maybe if you're coming in on this fresh, might not be as obvious as we would like, but, and I don't know I don't like how long this is. And so I'm going to do it like that, and I guess I'll put like a space there. And hopefully that reads a little better. All right, so now what do we expect to happen? Well, we need a visualization, ST visualization, and I think we do create ST visualizations. And here's an example of an ST visualization. Now here's where I don't know what to do because I've seen it done wrong so many times that I don't know if it's just that people screwed it up. So it would have been a good idea, but like see how I'm copying this and then I'm going to come down here and paste it. Like it might make sense to have something that returns a mock component instead of copying this mock component and something that returns an empty viz. But man, like I don't, when you're unit testing, it seems like your whole mindset is like to be highly focused on one small area. And once you start abstracting things out, you sort of lose that whole, what would you call it, the spell, the mindset, the whole concept is now you're thinking about abstractions. You're not thinking about that. Now I don't, yeah, okay, so this is our ST visualization. Now our ST visualization does not seem to have a mock empty viz dot st visualization ID. So we're going to give it a visualization ID of 1. So it should actually, it only would want to return, and I guess we'll call this, we'll just put a 1 in front of these. 1. And then I guess we'll make a 2. I feel like we're going to need that, but that's pure instinct at this point, not based in any kind of reality. Two, and 2. And then, so we are rendering 1. So we are, what we would expect, this is a function, and this function returns one of 2 things, a true or a false. And if the ID is the same, right, so we'll just say test when ID is the same. We want a false back. If the IDs are different, we want a true back, which is weird, right? Like mentally, but basically we want to reject, we want to not do whatever, not add it. We want it to not add it, which is what the filter does, whenever it's true, or whenever they're the same. And we want it to add it if it's not the same. Basically, we want to remove the one that we told it to remove. Yeah, I don't know a really good way of putting those words, but so we have our filter function. So const result1, right? Result1, which is a boolean, is equal to filter function. And what does the filter function accept? An ST visualization ID, which is mock component, mock empty viz1, right? And then what we expect is it breaks my heart every time I write one of these, because it's like, man, this is deprecated. It's just a hard thing to deal with. Result1 to be false, right? They're the same, so we want it to return a false. Just make sure that passes. If it doesn't, it wouldn't. I feel like there's a 70%. Ooh. So it got a true back. Is that how filter? So it's very strange. Okay, so, and maybe this is bad. Okay, so I sent in a visualization, right? And that visualization has an ID of 1. And we gave it a test renderer ID of 1. And it's supposed to return. Is it supposed to return true if It should return a false, right? But apparently it's returning a true. But let's see if what happened to our coverage. So now our coverage is perfect, but it's not doing what we're expecting. Okay, so I'm going to try the other one. Result 2. So this one is, I would have thought this will return a, oh, so, okay. Actually, okay, so that was a misunderstanding on how filters work. So what I'm expecting to happen, okay, so filters must remove it if it's true. But I feel like this code is, okay, so whenever a filter gets a true back, it should remove it. I don't know. So I think, so this is what it's doing. I think everything will pass at this point. Oh, wait. Am I crazy? He crazy. So it's upset that the true, so that the, well, okay, I don't know which one it is, which one is wrong. So is this one, so are they both? Whether I send in mockviz 2 or 1, is it always? Either they're, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen now. I'm confused. So now that's my negative. Okay, so it always returns true regardless of the mock viz, which is not good. Right, so whether the renderer ID is 2 or 1, this thing is returning true no matter what, which there's just no way that that's right. Now let's go look at the code. Let's look at the actual application real quick. I believe, and I'm not even 100% sure on this, but so it seems to be filtering it out, but maybe not. Maybe because, yeah, see, it isn't, because that was the bug. That was the bug that we were running across, and now we seem to have re-implemented it. All right, so we need to debug. We are in a debug situation. We've gotten our 100% and our code is broken. Okay, so now, and I guess this is that kind of thing. So we know that if they're not equal, that this and this not being equal would actually be, so it's supposed to return a true when they're not equal, and it's supposed to return a false when they are equal. And so in mockviz1, they should, this is what it should be. And I guess this is sort of a very, 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 what's the right word? Crude is the right word. Crude TDD, right? Test-driven development. At this point, I've fallen into test-driven development, and that I've written my tests. The code is not doing what I want it to do. So now I'm going to update the code until the test is right. So don't know why this is doing what it's doing, but I'm going to go back. I find this to be a little bit easier during coding time to deal with. And I think I'm going to need a little bit more space here. So this is what it's upset about. I think once you've started to scroll in here, you have to manually scroll from there on out. And actually, at this point, I guess it makes sense to focus on just this one test, because the rest of them are a bit of a distraction at this point. Now, sometimes that works going from not focus to focus, and sometimes it doesn't. All right, so it worked because we lost all of our coverage, and it is only testing the one test. Um, Now, I think what we can do now is add a console log, and let's just make sure I can find it. What I'm looking for is the console log to show up in here. Yeah, there we go. So you see it got called twice for some reason. So this function, I don't know why it's getting called. Oh, it's getting called twice because we call it twice. All right, so now I want to see the renderer ID. I will say that in unit testing is where I've probably been able to understand. Okay, so in both cases, the renderer ID is 1. Okay, so that's exactly what we expected. So I got me a nice little positive dopamine hit. Now, st visualization dot renderer ID. And maybe it's not actually, maybe, well, no, it's broken. It's actually broken. So let's see. Undefined. Okay, so that would be the problem. So when I call this function, the renderer, st renderer ID is undefined. So did I set the wrong one? Oh, yes. Gosh, I cannot believe how often I do that. It's not the visualization ID. Silly, it's the renderer ID. Although I do feel like the code is broken. It's not doing what I was expecting, I don't think. But maybe I forgot what I was expecting it to do. Don't know. That other part where like everything, like that used to really leave a bad spot in my like thought process. Okay, so it still says it failed. Okay, so 1 and 1 should return a false, right? And then 1 and 2 should return a true. But it's not happy with one of these. So now what I like to do, I guess, yeah, since we don't actually believe, I can just go like this. Then we'll come back down here and look over here. Okay, so 1 and 1 return to false, 1 and 2 return to true. Right, so that's what this happens. So let's come over here. So this would be, let's do this, console log. I have so much experience with trying to debug unit tests that like I just know to do this. I don't think it's necessarily like if you're like, oh man, I've never, oh crap, silly rabbit. If you're like, I didn't know you could console log and all that, it's just like, yeah, I mean, that's tough. Okay, so that all works now. All right. That was a silly mistake, guys. Silly, silly, silly. And gals, if that hurts your feelings, I definitely, genuinely appreciate. Oh, it doesn't even look like we need the components, huh? Viz component. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get rid of, let's clean this up. So we good. And then get rid of our console log. And sort of just doing, like, I like this better. I do. Like, there's two parts of me, right? There's me reviewing the code. I don't like the way this looks when I'm reviewing the code. And then there's me having to maintain and implement this code. And I do like this a lot better. I like that. I would rather, and to be, if I'm being completely honest, I would rather this be like that. Match equals. Like, just from a pure maintenance perspective, so that my life will be easier if a bug comes up or if I need to add a new feature. This is just so much better for me than the other thing. But then there's just the reality, right? There's the reality that you need this stuff to pass a PR. And the people who review PRs typically don't like having a whole lot of, they generally prefer terseness to doing that. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But one of the major things is, like, you just want to have a, like, fewer lines, like a lot of static analysis, and companies that you pay to, like, review code and stuff like that. A lot of them charge by line, and so if you have, like, a lot of boilerplate lines, that's sort of unneeded. What did I do wrong? That's like unnecessary expense. I don't know why it doesn't like that. If I put a space, will it? Can I do that? That is interesting. So that is okay. Let's see, is this okay? This is not okay. Interesting. So anyways, yeah, so I would probably turn it in like this. I don't know. Like, I think, like, I think you could get rid of the return. Like, you could also do this. No, I guess not. But I feel like that would be too much. But anyway, so let's make sure everything still passes. That was pretty cool, though, that sort of having the TDD thing. The thing is we didn't actually need it. Was just a problem with the test, not with that. But we definitely have a lot less red now. But we're still pretty red. And now, let's just sort of circle back again. Okay. Delete visual ID for render. It has a list of visual. It creates a list of visualizations, and it basically it filters out the ID that's passed in. So basically, it takes all the existing visualizations, and it gets rid of the one that you give it an ID to get rid of. It goes and finds the one, deletes it from the list. It creates a new list, and then it overwrites the old list with this new list. And that is extremely important because that kicks off all the redraws and all that throughout Angular. So you will likely, there's a good chance that it's not 100%, but there's a very strong chance that Angular will never notice that there was a change to anything if all you do is delete a value out of a list. You have to, or modify a value in a list. You have to create a new list and overwrite it so that it gets a new address so that it knows what's going on. Will that always be the case? Probably not. At some point, there'll probably be some way to mark a item dirty or something like that. But right now, that's the reality we're in. And now, whenever that comes, that's going to be it's good. However they decide to do that, it's going to be very difficult. Now, V, I don't like that. I don't like the name V. Um, so let's go ahead and clean this up. And we know that the V is actually an ST visualization. So since we ST, and I know I want to call it ST visualization. I feel like, to me, when that, I try not to be super judgy when it comes to like developers, other developers, but I have found that almost every middling developer that I've ever met, and middling developers are probably the most dangerous of all the developers. They are truly that sane. They know enough to be dangerous. Um, Almost every middling developer develops like with these sorts of names. Junior developers typically don't. To someone comes as a junior, they're very, very careful with the naming. A lot of times their names are stupid and wrong, but they're very, very careful with naming, and they do name things. And then they seem to go into like a phase where they just start naming things like a single letter, or like very generic names like list, um, string item, just like item, just no context at all. Um, then they kind of go through a phase where they spend like some time doing that, um, and then they realize their code is almost unmaintainable. So wherever ChatGPT got that from, it was definitely from like a middling developer. Um, and then and then you go back to when you're a senior, you go back to kind of like you were when you were a junior, where like you start to really fixate on the name, the way you name things, and then the other thing that comes in really strong as you become a senior developer is your names are actually good. Like they actually make sense. That's probably the difference between a junior developers name everything, but they're not very good at naming things. And then middling developers, they don't name shit. They just are like, whatever. It's a list. Whatever. I don't need to know. Just name it list. Just name it this. And then senior developers name things, and then the names are usually really good. Um, and that just comes with experience. So, but there we go. So basically, this thing, filter, when we go in here, we create a brand new function, a custom function for this renderer ID. That's all this does. This is like a factory. It it mints out a brand new function, and then it uh and then it gives it, for each visualization, it creates its own very custom function for the visualization. And the only reason we do that is because we need that function to have access to this renderer ID. That's the only reason we do it this way. So now I believe all we have to do is call this function and with a renderer ID, and with this visualization set to that. Now, this function would be easier to unit test if we can pass in the visualizations, as opposed to get the visualizations the um, from the state, the service attributes. Um, and we probably should explore that, like just passing in the visualizations instead. Actually, I'll do that right now. So what we want to do is we want to see how this guy gets called, because the question is when this guy gets called, when this method gets called, does it have, whatever calls this method, does it have access to the visualization? So are the visualizations within the scope? Probably my guess is yes, the visualizations will be in the scope, but I was wrong. So yeah, the ST so UI service calls it, so it probably does not have it within the scope. Um, so we probably don't want the UI service getting the list of visualizations and pass it in. If it was just in this, then that would be good. Now that would, I guess, it would encourage some discipline if we made this visualizations for renderer ID private and then called it from something that has access to it. But I think that brings in a whole nother set of problems that I just don't want to deal with. But I do think that this, while I was really hoping to finish up all the unit tests, I feel like this concept is so important. Um, as a matter of fact, I think I want to finish with taking this function and put it in ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT has to say about it. That's been another thing that I've really enjoyed doing. But like at work, I kind of have to. What I do at work is I go into Notepad and then I like sanitize anything, any names, or especially if there's like any like links, URLs, things like that in there, and put it in there. I probably would not. Yeah, I would sanitize this because like the names of these functions, if they're very useful, might give some context to someone that I don't want them to have. That so I have this Angular code. Angular TS code. Let's just see what it says about it. So yeah, so it defines a higher order function. That is such an important thing. This is a phrase that will come up in interviews and stuff like that. A higher order function. I believe a higher order function um, is written correctly and returns a filtering function based on specific breakdown of the and a minor enhancement suggestion. Um, okay, so this method returns a function, and I believe that that is what makes it a higher order function, and I definitely want to dig into that. That can be passed into filter to remove visualizations with a given renderer ID. And there's an example usage. So it says that I can, by naming the inner function. Okay, so that is probably good. But I don't think it named it, did it? I do like this comment. This is a good comment. Return. I think when it said name it, I think it was saying name this function, but it didn't. It didn't actually name it. Oh, okay. They went back to the return. Um, yeah, they did this, which did not, in fact, name the inner function or use an inline comment. So I wonder if I can't. I probably cannot put that on a new line. Oh yeah, I can. Oh, name or using an inline comment. Okay, so I think I'd rather use an inline comment. And again, I just don't think this return is going to fly, and I just don't like it. I don't like how it looks. Um, so anyways, let's just put a final point on what is a higher order function. So I have a feel like I have a really good feeling for what an higher. I think a higher order function is just a function that returns another function to be used. I think that's what that is. I'm not 100% sure, and I would like to read it to sort of either correct what I think that's incorrect, which would be the most valuable thing. Like if I have a bad idea in my head, I would like that to be fixed. But if it's not, I would like to further like sort of make what I think concrete. A higher order function is a function that does at least one of the following: takes another function as an argument or returns another function as its result. So that's interesting. I did not realize there's two. This is a powerful concept in functional programming and is common in JavaScript and TypeScript. That is true. And that is mostly true so that you can control, so that you can. I found that it's almost always used in the context of trying to get a closure or a scope to deal with getting the scope of a variable into your code. Um, okay, so common examples, map, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I have found that that the only time use higher order functions is when I am dealing with scoping issues. That makes a lot of sense. It's a sharp observation. Using higher functions to solve scoping issues is one of the most practical uses, especially in environments like Angular or JavaScript more broadly, where functions often run in different contexts. Callbacks, event handlers, blah, 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 blah. Why higher order functions help with scoping? JavaScript uses lexical scoping. I remember when I first came across that concept of lexical scoping. And I will say that I have tried to pull out that word in interviews like 5 or 6 times, and it always turns out bad. They do not want to talk about lexical scoping, which means a function remembers the variables from the context in which it was defined, not where it was called. Higher order functions leverage this to lock in variables. So I believe lexical scoping is when it doesn't matter what the code around it is. What matters is when a function is called. So the context has nothing to do with the file you're looking in. So you have a function in the file, there's variables set above it and all that, and then you call it, but you call it from some other thing. Like you have an object that has that function on it, you call it. And that function does not have access to, no, it's the other way around. It has access to what's in the file, not what is in runtime. So in order to pass what's in runtime, you have to use a higher order function. But the arrow context also does that. And as you can tell, I'm struggling with these. I understand these concepts. I use them all the time while I'm coding, but I'm struggling with being able to speak to them and be able to convert them into the English language. This uses a closure. So closure is another one of those words that's, as far as I can tell, in my personal experience, it's been exclusive to JavaScript. And it's just basically having access to the information that's in the runtime, not access to information that's in the file itself at compile time or at transpile time or at writing time, at authoring time. Even though the function return will be executed later, it's likely in a different context. You're essentially saying, I want to create a function now that knows about strRenderID so I can use it later. That's exactly right. I want to create a function now that uses. Alternatively, alternatives that don't scale well. Sure, you could use inline logic. Yeah, the problem is yeah, if you put the number in there, then and it's funny that it used 42. I wonder why it used 42. So if you like the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, 42 is the answer to everything. Um, but uh, but if 42 needs to come from a variable, then you'll need to pass the logic around the higher order function. Um, so, anyways, that's pretty darn advanced stuff. It's kind of stuff that, like, you really, if you want to be a really good JavaScript or Angular or probably more so React, and I don't know anything about that other framework. I don't even remember what it's called. But if you want to do on front end browser code, you probably really need to struggle and fight with these concept of closures, higher order functions. I didn't realize, and I'm glad, to get that out of this, that it either takes another R. If it takes another function, it's also a higher order, and if it returns a function, either one of those makes it a higher order. And I'm assuming that you also get plenty of examples of both. I'm pretty sure you do. Um, it's kind of weird that it's showing that it doesn't use ST visualization. I think that is definitely that's yeah. I guess it can't tell. Like it doesn't know what it's gonna get, but whatever it's gonna get is going to get a ST visualization. Um, but I guess I'll leave it at that because that is a pretty intense concept. Um, so in the next video, we'll definitely unit test this, delete visualization, which should be pretty straightforward. Um, it's kind of a bummer. It's not a pure function, so I will have to set the visualization list. I'll have to create some visualizations, which is not going to be hard, and then run that. But it would be nice. This would be a nicer function if I could accept the list of of renderers, and maybe that would make sense, of visualizations, and maybe it would make sense to do that, but I'm not going to. And then get farthest right. I think this one is basically going to be more of the same. We're going to have to create a higher order function that returns a function that does this because it needs to know right. It needs to know what right is. Um, and it won't, the only way we'll be able to do that is to create a little factory function that returns a function that knows what right is, a custom function that knows what the current right is. Now, does this? Okay, good. No. So this actually returns. This actually sets right too. So that actually is much more complicated because the right is constantly changing. So that's going to be quite the challenge to unit test too. And then, so we are definitely running into sort of little corners of the web and concepts that I don't have a lot of experience in. So, and I guess that is one of the major benefits of this project is to run into these things. So if I just make this stuff work, or if I decide that 95% is plenty good enough, um, I'm really missing out on probably what I really need to do, and that's get a better understanding what's going on here, maybe better ways of doing this, because I don't. This is quite the interesting problem, but I guess all we're trying to do is get right. So this is a little different, and maybe, yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I can't that. I'm actually really looking forward to digging into how we should straighten this out. And this is like Like if all you care about is the application working, like if you're at the 30,000, like who gives a shit about this? But if all you care about is building tight little nice software, um, and a bunch of functions that fit together and all that, then there's nothing more important than this. And I guess as like a generic developer, like when you get pulled in, like if you get a job somewhere in the enterprise and you're just a generic developer, like you kind of get caught in the middle between the people who care about this and couldn't really, honestly, they couldn't care less whether the application works or not. They care about this. This is what they care about. They don't, if the whole application where doesn't work, it doesn't matter because they are so fixated on this. And then you got the people that are up here that could not care less if it's complete garbage under the hoods. They really, honestly, they could not care less. They just want their feature done. Um, and when you're a dev, a regular dev, you're sort of caught in between those two groups. And, it's just like usually the people that care about this top are a little bit more powerful than the people who care about this stuff. But the people who care about this stuff are usually a lot more aggressive and intense than the people, a lot harder to get along with, a lot more likely to make your life miserable. So, yeah, that's just the reality of coding. I've never really, never, this is literally the first time. Those are just new novel thoughts that I've never had before. Anyways, I hope everyone has a wonderful 4th of July. I have got a lawn to mow, and then I will go on a mission to find a nice shirt to wear today. Um, it's going to be a wonderful day for me, and I hope it's going to be a wonderful day for you as well. Happy coding, everybody. Bye.